All right, so that was a lot of new stuff, but hopefully it's satisfying to see things moving around. I'm trying to talk to you while wiggling the cursor and, and make this thing animate as well. But let's talk about what your homework assignment's going to be. This is actually pretty straightforward this time. This is a 2-week project. You're going to make a sketch in P5.js that responds to your mouse, at least, if not other inputs like your keyboard. And it should just be this visually interesting, cool exploration of interactivity. For the first part, you're going to make some sketches and take some screenshots and share those and get some feedback. And then the final version should be a really like robust working version. You're going to eventually take 3 screenshots of it running. And this is a really big challenge for interactive projects. How do you show that to people? In Creative Programming 2, we're going to look at doing screen recordings and stuff like that, which capture stuff really nicely. But for now, just take some screenshots and then a link to your code. I'd also really like to encourage you to think about using an external editor rather than the P5.js one, so that you can make them run, because I would like them to be full screen. I'd like them to use window width and window height to be nice and big, and it's going to be a lot easier to do that in the external editor. So there's a really wonderful paper that's in the readings folder by David Saltz called The Art of Interaction, Interactivity, Performativity, and Computers. And he describes interactive art as having 3 things: an input device that translates one's behavior into digital form. So that might be the mouse or the keyboard. I teach a course called Physical Computing where we use Arduinos and sensors. So you can use like the humidity of the soil of your cactus to be an input. So it can be whatever. We don't have a ton of options here, though your phone certainly has a bunch as well. That input data affects the output in some way. So it's this like feedback loop, and that the output is translated back into real world phenomena that we can perceive in real time. And this is a really important one here. So we want to be able to see something happen. That's that feedback idea, that it's happening live in front of us. Otherwise, it's not really interactive. And we saw tons of examples in the code examples here, using the mouse to make things change position or size or whatever. And I'd like you to think about this kind of like the randomness project, where you are trying to pack as much interactivity as possible. I really want you to just go bananas on this and see what happens. And I've listed just some possible ways of thinking about it. So if you're feeling stuck, go to this list. Things like position, stillness, motion, speed. You could change, as your mouse moves across the screen, you might have a fixed position object rotating and it gets faster or slower. Things getting bigger or smaller, appearing or disappearing. One thing you could do is an if statement and look at the mouse X position, for example. And if your cursor is on the left side, one shape shows up. And if it's on the right side, another shape shows up. You could change the parameters of a shape. I'm starting to lose my voice. This is too many demos. Things like the number of sides on the shape, or like I was just saying, switching between shapes, rotation, the angle that something is rotated, faster or slower, starting or stopping. Color, you can have it change color or using lerp color. We talked a little bit about hue, saturation, and lightness color. How many of something. So if you have a for loop, you could have the end condition of that change based on, again, where your mouse is or how fast it's moving, or thinking about nesting these things together into complex interactions. So if I'm in the upper left-hand quadrant with my mouse and it's pressed and I'm moving fast enough, then something happens. And you could build then through this like really complex exploratory kinds of interactions. So I'd like you to think about a couple things, because already then this starts to just go wild. One is that fancy code and boring output equals boring art. So I don't want you to spend your whole time building this amazing back-end sort of system only to have it not make very interesting output. This should not be something that, like a drawing app, where we have to spend a ton of time inputting into it. In fact, I would like you to not make a drawing app or physics simulations or those kinds of things, as much as that might be exciting, because you're going to spend all your time on the tech and no time really figuring out what this thing looks like. And the same goes for this idea of feature creep. Feature creep is where you keep adding and adding stuff without really thinking about the core idea of what you're doing. So I'd much rather you make something technically simple, but visually amazing that we just are like addicted to and want to play with, rather than something like a physics simulation or a drawing app. And this image up here is one of my favorites. This is from, I don't know the year exactly, early-ish 20th century, middle 20th century, at a Sage console. This is a military technology, and he's using a light pen to input into this amazing computer. I would totally love if Apple made a computer that looked like this. So great. So there's code examples, and these videos you can check out if you want to figure out how to share your sketch or see it full screen if you're working in the editor. This may be helpful for you. And again, your deliverables are going to be this interactive sketch that uses at least mouse input, if not others. And I showed in the first example there is like mobile, the acceleration, tilt, and that kind of stuff. If you want to try to use that, getting that working with P5.js and your computer and stuff is kind of tricky. But if that's exciting and you want to try that, that's great. It should run full screen, taking up the width and the height. And eventually you're going to turn in three screenshots of your program running. There's some examples here. I'm not going to go through these in too much detail. I did want to show you just a couple though. I'll let you check those out. The first is A. Michael Knoll, who we've talked about, a researcher at Bell Labs, early computer graphics. This is him. It's a little hard to see, also with a light pen and this boutique input device. This is a moment in the 60s. This is the early era of the computer. There was no set idea of how this should go. And people were inventing these inputs all the time, something I love because it's really cool. And A. Michael Knoll then building these cool artworks in the early 60s using these tools. This is a contemporary project by Graffiti Research Lab, which is a collaborative of a bunch of artists called iWriter. This is a colleague of theirs who was paralyzed and unable to move. He was a graffiti writer, and so his colleagues built this device that would read the movement of his eyes and allow him to make tags using that. I thought I had, here we go. Oh, this is another project by them, but similar idea. Anyway, yeah, so the like iWriter was able to allow him to digitally write these tags. And then I believe this project kind of is in the same vein, also from Graffiti Research Lab. This uses a laser pointer, which then gets tracked by the computer, and then it has a very high-powered projector, so you can tag the sides of huge buildings using projections. It's obviously not destructive. But this was something, for example, iWriter could get plugged into, and you could make tags with this. This is the first mouse prototype. Also love how handmade this thing is, from 1964. A little chewed up, but super cool. All this like early history of these technologies that we use and take for granted, I think, are really beautiful and interesting. And then just a few other kind of like input devices, historical. It's another light pen. This is an IR touchscreen input. This is like way, pre 1981, pre iPad, of course. This is another touchscreen. Just think this is like a beautiful object. More input devices. And the Sage console. More of those. Yeah, this is from the 50s. So lots of stuff there you can dig into. And there's some other stuff, some articles on interactivity. So if you're interested in that, you can check out the reading folder. And then the last thing that may be helpful, if you're looking for more examples, is to go into the P5.js examples. And they have a section on simulation is a much more complicated thing, but there's some interactivity examples and some motion examples. So you might want to check those out if you're interested in that. There's also some mobile ones that show you how to use the accelerometer and things like that. But don't feel like you have to build a thing like you've seen before or useful software. This is really a visual exploration. Go crazy, make something super cool. I can't wait to see what you make.